Is your body changing and you think it may be perimenopause or menopause, but are totally confused on the topic? Then this episode is for you. And I decided to make this very basic education on menopause for you because I have done over 300 and something interviews, stopping women on the street who I don't know, who are not in my circle, asking them 5 questions about menopause. And it is very clear to me that you're not alone. No one knows what's going on. And it's okay. It's normal. I'm going to keep this episode really short, really simple. I actually made it as well or as a slideshow and a presentation for our new members in the Biohacking Menopause membership group. This is a women's only support group because this group isn't all about biohacking. We all know what's going on. No, it's for new people too. So we're going to start out with what are hormones, what's menopause, talk about the different stages of menopause, just give you a clear understanding, basic understanding of what's going on so that you can also go and listen to other menopause podcasts or talk to your doctor and speak the same language and understand what's kind of going on. And don't worry if some of these new words are new to you and you're a little uncomfortable. It's okay. Just stick with it because when you hear them over and over and over and over again, your brain sticks, right? It understands. So these are the stats. And there are many, what are they called? Surveys out there. And they'll have slightly different numbers. But in general, this is what is happening out there. 50% of the women say that they feel they're uninformed about menopause. I think it's more based on because I've interviewed over 300 people, but I've spoken to a lot of them because I do get a lot of rejection as well on the street. And they're women who don't really want to be in front of a camera, but they do want to talk about menopause and what's going on. They're so happy somebody asked them about it. So I would say this number is even higher. Other surveys show that 90% were never taught about menopause in school. Well, I would say like 99%. I don't know anyone who's been, at least in my generation, who has ever been taught about menopause in school. And we're talking about high school. And maybe if you did certain courses in college, maybe, but even then it would be very small. And then more than 60% only start learning after symptoms begin. I also think that this number is probably a little higher than what the surveys show, but it's normal. That's great. And that's why I always say I'm always a little bit worried about the asymptomatic woman is because she won't go and learn because she doesn't feel anything. And just because you don't feel anything doesn't mean that things are not happening under the hood. So we got to always check and see how we feel. This is why it's good to go to get a checkup every year. And it's something to find things in an eye, maybe you don't want to find anything. Sometimes people say you search and you will find. Yes, you don't want to search too hard, but we want to have a balance of not having our head under the sand, but yet still see how we are evolving and changing as we age because we tend to age a little more rapidly as we go through menopause. So it's really just, this episode is really just trying to help you figure out really what's happening in your body. And a lot of women ask me, is it menopause that I'm feeling this, or is this the loss of the hormones, or is this something else? And this is where I have to ask more questions because it depends, right? And as we go through this transition, we are aging. There are things that are just age related as well. There are thyroid issues, let's say, like other things in your body that's been happening. Say thyropause. I did a great episode with Dr. Amy Horniman, who's an expert in thyroid. And when we talk, she talks about all these thyroid symptoms. I'm like, no, that's menopause symptoms. No, it's high thyroid. So they can overlap. And this is why we test and measure and assess. So we can just determine some of these things. Is it the loss of the hormones or is it something else? And then there's just life, right? There's stress, there's burnout. Maybe you don't like your job. Maybe you're going through divorce. Maybe you're moving countries. Maybe there's parents are dying. Like this is major life stressors and they can give you menopause-like symptoms. And I always feel that menopause or when we lose our hormones, we tend to be a little less resilient. That's all. Because that's the comment that I hear oftentimes when I say, well, it's just life. They're like, well, I don't know. I used to be able to handle it better. And that's menopause, right? This is just, we're going through the ups and downs and changing, and then life happens. So it just gets a little more difficult, but then this makes us stronger through life, right? It builds resilience. We have to go through some difficulty sometimes. Now I want to cover just very basic hormones. I didn't know what hormones were at some point, and I still know very little about hormones. So anything you hear in this podcast in general is subject to change, right? It's subject to the science evolves, or maybe there's something that is applicable to you and something that's totally not applicable to you. So you have to take sometimes all these podcasts and all these experts, I don't care if they're a doctor or a researcher, with a grain of salt. We have to understand, we have to become health literate, which is my trying to say. So the very basics on hormones are little chemical messengers in our body. You can measure them through the blood. They travel through our bloodstream and they bind to these things called receptors. And then they tell the body what to do. So it's like a lock and key. People describe it as a lock and key. And there's these receptors all over our body and all of our tissues and our cells and all that. And they're just kind of waiting for that hormone to float around and attach to it because they know how to come together. They know where they belong. And when they attach to it, then they give a little message. They give instructions on what to do, right? So this is where hormones can have instructions to regulate your sleep or how moody you're going to be or how calm you're going to be, how relaxed. Are you hungry? Are you satiated? What's your metabolism going to do? Is your temperature regulated? Is it going to be hot? Is it going to be cold? Where are you going to store fat? How are you going to build muscle? And these hormones also tell other hormones what to do. It's such a symphony. It's so complex. And I'm going to talk about the three main sex hormones, but these are just a few. They don't work in isolation. They all have a role to play, but they play with the other players. So this is what I want you to understand. So when our hormones change, when they go up, they go down, they leave us, then that little text message that our body gets also changes. The instructions change. And that's why it's such a tumultuous time, because for women at least, because the messages keep changing until they settle down. So the three main sex hormones that I'm going to talk about today are estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. And if these are new to you, don't worry. This is going to keep this very basic. And as you're learning more about menopause, you're going to hear these three come up all the time. Now, estrogen, when we say the word estrogen, we may have to ask, what are we talking about? Which type of estrogen? Because there are many different types of estrogen. But there's three main ones that are talked about in menopause, and there are others, but let's stick with the three. There's estradiol, which is E2, estrone, which is E1, and estriol, which is E3. And to remember these, E1, E2, E3, sometimes if you look at research studies, you'll see it, the E2, it's a capital E and a number 2. And you can remember them. E1 is estrone because you write estrone. The word one is inside estrone. Estradiol has the word di. Di usually refers to 2. And then estriol has the word tri, like 3. And that helps you remember which one is E1, E2, E3, because sometimes these research doesn't actually spell it out. So estradiol, E2, is the main one, and it's the most powerful one before menopause, before it goes away, basically. And then estrone, E1, it's more dominant after menopause. And there are reasons for that. And then there's estriol, which is E3, and it's most prevalent, I guess, or more present when we're in pregnancy or during pregnancy. Okay. So the ones if you were to be prescribed about hormones or HRT, which we will not get into today, it's usually estradiol or estriol, usually one of those or both. And estrogen, it supports our brain, our bones, our heart, our skin, collagen, temperature, libido. Yes, a lot of people think it's testosterone. Yes, testosterone does that, but estrogen also helps libido. And it's an anti-inflammatory. There's so many things that it supports, especially if we have so many of these estrogen receptors everywhere in the body, not in every single place, but in many places in the body, we have it. And it's made in premenopause. Now, remember, we have premenopause, perimenopause, and post-menopause. Okay, these are different words. Most people are mixing pre and peri. So pre is when you are ovulating regularly. It's before you hit this perimenopause, this up and down change in your life. So when you're in premenopause, your ovaries are pretty much the main place where you make estrogen. Call it the estrogen factory, is in your ovaries mostly. And then when you get pregnant, the placenta kind of joins in. And then post-menopause, when estrogen goes away, the ovaries shut down. But the fat tissues and the adrenal glands, those are the places sometimes where really small amounts can be made through some adrenal precursors, and then they can convert into estrogen in other tissues, and then it gets all complicated. But basically, this little estrogen factory kind of shuts down. Now we have progesterone. Progesterone is produced after we ovulate, and it helps us sleep. It helps us stay calm. It keeps our mood regular. It helps with our menstrual cycle, helps with pregnancy. That's why I call it progest. Pro, it's for helping your gestation. And it's the first one to go. And it starts as early as your mid 30s. And this is a real surprise. This blew my mind when I found this out. And I didn't give you the memo. The hormone training that I did mostly is with the Institute of Bioidentical Medicine with Dr. David Rosensweet's Menopause Method program. Although I have since done other programs and learned so much. And again, things keep changing. So this is very often where I get my information from that training, as well as just, my goodness, all the books that I read and all the things that I take in. So anyways, that just blew my mind when I first heard that. And when looking back, I kind of go, oh yeah, that kind of explains things. I didn't know what perimenopause was when I was going through it. So I'm so happy you're listening in right now, preparing yourself. If not, you're there already. But anyways, progesterone, when you're premenopause, the ovaries are pretty much the main progesterone factory. And then early pregnancy, the ovaries and the corpus luteum do most of the work. And then placenta takes over, but we won't get into that. And then post-menopause, yeah, it's kind of gone. The adrenals, again, can make a little baseline supply, but really if you're starting to lose it so early, boy, yeah, don't expect it to be around in your 50s. There was something else I wanted to say about progesterone. Oh yeah, the other thing that I learned about it was it doesn't, with most people, again, everyone's different. It doesn't go up and down and up and down, but it has a very steep decline. It's not as fluctuating as estrogen. And that also surprised me as well. Like if you had a line, it's just more of a fast line down. So if you are feeling moody, stressed, you can't sleep, and the first thing I'd look at is progesterone, kind of where are you at? And again, we're all different, right? We are all different. So some people feel things, some people don't, but progesterone is a hormone to be aware of. Now, the next hormone we're talking about is testosterone. And testosterone is well known for helping with your libido. If you don't know what libido, gosh, I had to explain this. Libido, I shouldn't be using these words sometimes because not everybody knows what libido is. It's your sex drive, your desire for sex. You're feeling like, oh yeah, I want to get some. and testosterone has this little bump during our menstrual cycle. And that's where we get this motivation, like go out, party, meet people. And that's where we tend to get our sex drive. And it also helps with energy and muscle. And I've heard of testosterone researchers and experts say, no, it's just for libido. And I kind of disagree. I talk to many women who are taking testosterone and they tell me otherwise. And I do believe that testosterone is in the body of a woman, not just for libido. I believe there are many other things that it does. So anyways, I digress. And testosterone declines much more slowly and much more gradually. It's not as big of a culprit in the way that we struggle with menopause symptoms in this transition. So you can even see a woman in her 50s with pretty good testosterone levels. It's not unusual. It'll eventually go away, but it's one of those things like I kind of go, well, test and measure and assess. How do you feel? What are your symptoms like? And if any at all, good thing to know. So testosterone is made pre-menopause before you get into this transition mostly in the ovaries and the adrenals. Other tissues also can convert them from other hormones, basically other hormones into testosterone. So you can take a deep dive into hormones. I've got other podcast episodes on this that explains all of these things. And then after menopause, of course, our ovaries are making less, but the adrenals, maybe some other tissues can still produce some testosterone. That's the testosterone. So there's estrogen, which is estrone, estriol, and estradiol, right? There's E1, E2, E3. And then we have progesterone and we have testosterone. And be careful, be very mindful of if you're reading some PubMed research or articles, sometimes they say the word progesterone and they really mean progestin, which is a synthetic progesterone. And it's very different. So that's why it's really hard to scrub through some menopause research without knowing some of these things. But you're going to get there if you're not there already. So what's happening in this menopause transition? Well, our ovaries kind of run out of eggs, right? And then ovulation, when we get our period, right? Waiting to make a baby, that our ovulation and our periods become totally irregular, and then they eventually stop. And then estrogen and progesterone decline most of the time. Eventually they will. And no matter how healthy you are, you cannot bring these hormones back, which really sucks. And you try so hard, not that you shouldn't take care of your body and have a good healthy diet and lifestyle, but that will help. It should help with the transition and help with many other things. Anyways, it'll help with aging, but it's not a guarantee that you won't have symptoms. So please take care of your diet and lifestyle, but know that don't be disappointed or frustrated if everything you do is not working. Anyways, another interesting thing, note, there's two other hormones that I'm going to just throw it at you. You don't need to memorize these. It's FSH and LH. This is follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. And when the ovaries are not able to make so much estrogen as much as the body wants and needs, it's follicle stimulating hormone. It's trying to stimulate the follicles. It sends a signal to create more estrogen. And if it's not being made, then if you were to take a blood test in a lab, that would rise. And so does luteinizing hormone. It rises because it's not getting the response that it wants to get. The ovaries are just not responding anymore. And so that's why doctors would tend to look at FSH in your blood. And if it's high, then they go, okay, you're in menopause. And in addition to 12 consecutive months without a period, which we're going to talk about in just a sec. So the hormone timeline in your mid 30s, this is where progesterone starts to decline. This is where we get these first signs and symptoms of perimenopause. They're very subtle, they're very light in the very beginning. You're kind of like, oh, I don't know, I woke up at 2 a.m., couldn't fall asleep, and what happened? And then it happens over and over and over again, a little bit more frequently. And then you go, that's progesterone. Could be life, could be stress, could be many other things, but could be progesterone too. And then there's perimenopause, and that's when estrogen fluctuates up and down. Menopause, estrogen drops more significantly, and then testosterone, and can stay within those even premenopausal ranges through perimenopause, but eventually will decline. So it's not a smooth decline for many women. Some women don't feel anything, or they're just not aware of the connection of some of their symptoms to hormonal decline. So it's a roller coaster for many of us, but not for everybody. But I still encourage everyone to please pay attention, right? Get some testing, go see your doctor, just get a checkup and where you're at and make sure everything is running smoothly, even if you don't feel a thing. Now, what is menopause? Menopause. When I speak about menopause, when I ask a woman, are you in menopause? And she's 65, she'd be like, no, I didn't do that. Or menopause is way behind me. And I ask, well, are you still having a period? No. Well, you are in menopause. So it can refer to the transition. It could refer to your symptoms. It can refer to having a difficult time through the transition. It's an umbrella. It can mean perimenopause. It can mean postmenopause. It's such an umbrella word. It's hard to even define, but the medical definition is just 12 consecutive months without a period. So if you had lost your period for 3 months, came back, well, no, you got to start the clock all over again. You're in perimenopause. If you are 6 months, 9 months, 10 months, and then your period came back, you got to start all over again. You're still in perimenopause. You got to wait, which I think is kind of a stupid definition, but it's a 1-day event. And that one day, I call it your meno birth date. And that's menopause. So that's when your doctor would say, yeah, you're in menopause. The average age of menopause in North America and in the Western world in general is 51. And in Asia and Africa, it's on average 48. In Latin America, the Middle East, around 47. I remember even India, I read somewhere it's 46. So that means you are definitely in menopause, right? You're now post-menopause after you've had that birth date. So the transition is what we're most concerned about, at least what we're feeling, or what's the difficulty. And that, on average, 7 years. I've heard people say I've been perimenopause, or I've been having menopause symptoms for 20 years, or I've been in perimenopause for 10 years. I've been in there for 15 years and only knew about it the last 5. It can be a long time. And I've also met women who said, oh, for me, menopause was just like a difficult month. And then I lost the period, went away, nothing dramatic. And then it doesn't mean that perimenopause or this transition happened in 5 months. No, but it's what they were feeling maybe was in about a month. It's if you were to actually measure someone's blood and look at all their biomarkers and everything, yeah, it's between 5 and 10 years. Really, on average, people say 7. You're going to hear so many numbers out there. It doesn't matter. What matters most is you. And that's why if you do the whole biohacking thing and test and measure and assess and understand your body and dial in and track your symptoms and know where you're at, then that's all that matters, because you're the most important person in the room right now, right? Now, perimenopause, we call it around menopause, but it's really the time before. It's about 5 to 10 years before menopause. This is when your hormones are fluctuating up and down. It's usually estrogen, but it's also the difference between estrogen and progesterone that matters too. If one is super high and one is super low, even though they're quote unquote technically normal levels, then it's that differentiation that can be a problem as well. So there's 3 stages of perimenopause. There's early, mid, and late perimenopause. So early menopause is, I don't know, mid 30s, say up to 40. And that's when you may start to notice something's different with your cycle. Something's different. You maybe were a 28-day girl all your life, and suddenly you're 25, or then you're 30. Something is happening. Maybe they're shorter, longer, heavier, lighter. You know your body and something's off. And it's just very subtle. It's very not a big deal in this early stage. You don't really even notice it much, or it doesn't even bother you that much. But then you also may start having sleep issues. And if you have a baby at 35, which is not unusual, well, then maybe it's the baby, or maybe it's both, or maybe it's a combination. That could be happening too. And then there's maybe you have anxiety. Maybe you never had anxiety in your life and suddenly it comes on. Maybe you're weepy. This totally happened to me. I was like crying. I don't know. I would like, I don't know, watch a baby commercial or something stupid and then just cry and feel teary. And I didn't know what was going on. And then it like went away. And I was like, what was that? Not realizing it was my hormones. And then there's mid. So the mid stage is like 40s, early 40s, more or less. And this is where we may have mood swings. Maybe we're a bit more, have less of a patience. Maybe we get more brain fog, where we can't recall that word that we were just about to say, or we walk in a room, we're not sure even why we're there anymore. Weight gain, you're like, I don't know, everything's the same. I haven't changed anything with the diet and exercise, and I start to gain weight. And usually it's in the middle. And then maybe your ovulation, your cycles and things are totally off now. And again, we have different, some people have none of these symptoms. Some people have the sleep issues that come in only in the late stage of perimenopause. Like, again, this is so general. It's not going to mean that that's going to happen to you. This is just what's been reported and what we know for now. And then the late stage is when you're really skipping periods, or there are women I told you who have perfectly periods and then it just stops. That can happen too. But most women would tend to start skipping periods. And I interviewed one woman who said, oh my gosh, my mom thought that she was pregnant and she told the whole family she was going to have a baby because she lost her period. And then she went to the doctor. Doctor said, nope, you skipped a period because you're in perimenopause. So that's a very, very common thing. And that happens in the, say, mid 40s up to 50, early 50s. You can be in that late perimenopause stage, not unusual at all. And this is also where you may start feeling a hot flash, the night sweat. And that is such a clear indication. That's why we always default into the 1 or 2 symptoms we know, which is a hot flash or a night sweat, because they happen if you're around that age. It's like, that's very menopause. Where if it's just sleep issues, you're not really sure. It could be so many things, or fatigue. Vaginal dryness is another thing that's very often happens around this time. Sex becomes a little painful. Maybe you have more frequent UTIs. This is the genitourinary syndrome of menopause, which I'll just mention briefly later on. So yeah, this is the time, the perimenopause stage is when women start going, I don't feel like myself anymore. Something's off. And that's why you're listening to this. So here are some variations. We have perimenopause, which I just spoke about. Then we have menopause, which is that 1-day event. And then we have post-menopause. So we have, before I go into that, we have early menopause. So early menopause would be somewhere around the ages of 40 to 45. Okay. And we're talking about the Western world here. Okay. Because these numbers will be different for average ages in Asia and Latin America and all that. So 40 to 45 is called early menopause. Nothing crazy, it's nothing bad. It's just your genetics probably, or there's other things that can affect the age of menopause. But let's say that's the reason. So then that happens to about 5 to 12% of women is what the research says. But it seems to me like it's got to be a bigger number. And so your genetics play a role. But if you're having early menopause, you can also be because of, let's call it risky behaviors. Risky behaviors would be smoking, poor diets and lifestyle choices, high stress, surgery as well. That's not a risky behavior, but say you have a surgery, you had a hysterectomy, you have to remove your ovaries, that throws you into early menopause. Chemotherapy or radiation is another thing. And then we have premature menopause, and premature menopause is before the age of 40, and that's about 1% of the women. Okay. So this is nothing to do with chemotherapy or surgery or anything like that. This is just the natural age of menopause. If it happens before 40, it's called just premature, and it happens to about 1% of ladies. So then there's late menopause. So this is if you still have a period at 55. That means you're not on hormone therapy. You just naturally still have a period that's called late menopause. Okay, menopause is happening later. It's almost like late perimenopause, but that's what it is. And then postmenopause, we have two stages: the early postmenopause stage and the late postmenopause stage. And it doesn't mean, oh, you had your period, I mean, you got menopause too late or too early. It just means it refers to those first 2 years after your menopause birth date, the first 2 years after menopause and the early stages of menopause. So your hormones are still adjusting. It's not like like your birth date's there and then they're gone. Like it can still be fluctuating somewhat. Estrogen continues to decline, and then FSH continues to rise. And then late post-menopause is on average 5 years after that. Now, everybody has little technical definitions for this. It's just, I have a feeling that postmenopause is going to have many other stages, because postmenopause when you're 50 is very different than postmenopause when you're 80. So I think we need more words here. So for now, the late postmenopause stage is pretty much when your hormones stabilize at those lower levels, and then your symptoms hopefully have gone away, or at least are decreasing and decreasing more and more. But even if you're in the clear, you're postmenopause. I mean, so many women on the street are like, I am done with that. Hooray, haha. But the risks of low estrogen, the risks of low hormones continue to increase. Now, your hot flashes may have gone away, hooray, on their own, but your vagina is still getting dry. You're still subject to sarcopenia, to osteoporosis, bone loss, osteoarthritis, heart disease, metabolic issues, insulin resistance, diabetes, the genitourinary syndrome of menopause. This is when painful sex, dry vagina, frequent UTIs. This could lead to sepsis and death. This is just because you go, I don't know. This is really serious. It's important to know that even if you don't feel your bones getting brittle or your heart building plaque, you still need to be aware of it, I believe. You can, again, have your head under the sand, and that's your choice. But it is good to know these things, that we're just more at risk now with the loss of these hormones, because this is why they say hormones are an anti-inflammatory, hormones are protective, these are great, and we're talking about our own natural hormones. So when we lose them, it's like all hell breaks loose, even if we don't feel it. And that's what's disturbing. So this is why we got to do all that we can do to improve our chances or lower our risk of all these things, which we can. We can. And what you do now in this period, whether you're 40s or 50s, will affect how you are in your 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, if you're lucky to get there, and get there without too much distress, pain, and difficulty. You want to be in a good condition. So this is really important that you take these steps. And I always say menopause, it's not a decline, but it's an opportunity to take control of our health so that we can be stronger and more independent in our 80s and 90s. We've got to protect our 80-year-old self. Again, you don't have to. You do you, but this is what I want to do, because I want to do the things that I want to do when I'm older. And that means now Alzheimer's doesn't start when you're 70. It starts decades before. Same thing with osteoporosis and heart disease. Anyways, I digress. Let's talk about why you're feeling the way you feel. And it's very often due to the estrogen. We have estrogen receptors everywhere. We have them in our brain, our bones, our heart, immune system, fat tissue. This is why menopause is a full body experience. It's not just a one body part thing, and just not your joints. It's many more things. And I want to ask you, did you know that there are over 100 symptoms of menopause? We know like 3. I mean, we generally, when I talk to women on the street, they're usually referring to hot flashes and maybe mood swings and the loss of their periods. That's very universal. So don't feel bad. You're not alone. And Andrea Donsky is a menopause researcher, and she found 103, and she's posted them on her website, which I'll have a link to that in the show notes, because if you're going, God, I don't know, I have such ringing in my ear or itchy skin, or I'm smelling something nobody else does, like maybe that's your hormones, right? Maybe, or the loss of your hormones, or maybe it's something else. I don't know, but it is interesting because she's got great research and articles for every single one of these symptoms, and it's published research. So I'm not making this up, because if you do a Google search, you'll probably find maybe 30, something like that. But there's so many more. It's so good to be aware of these things, because you're not going crazy. This is just menopause. And about 75 to 85% of the women going through this transition experience some hot flashes or night sweats. I've had, I wouldn't say night sweats, but I say I get hot at night if my estrogen is too low. And sleep issues definitely happened to me in my 40s when that started I was waking up to pee. I mean, I was like, I never wake up to pee. Like, what is that all about? That started happening in my 40s. Mood changes. It's when you get a little snappy, a little bit bigger, more temper. I think this is like a superpower in some ways. I tell my husband, I love menopause. I feel empowered. I feel like now I can make boundaries when I didn't before. So I think I don't, yeah, don't fuss over the little things anymore. I just want to focus on the big picture. So that's some different for me, but that's menopause. And maybe it's also getting older. I don't know. So other things, brain fog and weight gain are pretty much the main drive, the main ones that kind of think about very often. Vaginal dryness, I think, is also very common. And then the things that are a little bit less talked about are joint pain. I know a lot of women have no idea that joint pain could be related to the loss of their estrogen. Estrogen is hydrating. It's a nice, it helps us create more synovial fluid. It helps us, it's an anti-inflammatory. It's so amazing when you have it. But and if you don't have an injury and you don't have any other reason for this joint pain, it's a good time to look at your hormones. Digestive issues are also very common in this. It's very common and less talked about. These are the symptoms that I want to bring up. Heart palpitations, tinnitus, that means it's ringing in your ear, burning mouth. You're not alone, right? So go and check out Andrea's article on, it's a blog article, all her web. No, it's not one blog, it's like many blog articles because the whole website is populated with all these symptoms. The silent risks that we just need to be aware of, and I mentioned them briefly before, is the osteoporosis and heart disease, right? This is, you don't feel that, and hypertension as well, high blood pressure, because this raises your risk of a stroke and a heart attack. That's pretty much it. I know I've talked a lot and there's a lot for you to digest, but this is very basic. And I hope you've grasped some things. You can go and rewind and listen to this again or take your notes. These symptoms are real. You're not going crazy. Your body's not broken. This is not a decline. This is just a transition. And we can train smarter and eat better and recover better and just support our bodies completely differently so that our future self will thank us. So let me know if you've listened to this, what surprised you. If you have any questions, reach out to me. Share this with a friend who needs to hear it, who's still also just as lost as we all were at some point. So please share that. And while you're there, why don't you subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, or rate and review. These little gestures make such a big impact. So pretty please, it would be so amazing if you could go and do that. It takes 2 seconds and I will love you forever. And if you need a little bit more support, why don't you join us in our community, the Biohacking Menopause membership group. I have a link to that in the show notes. You'll get more support, a little bit more personalization. We meet with doctors and researchers and experts in menopause to help you through this transition. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening. I wouldn't be here without you. I so appreciate you. And I hope you have a good day, good night, good morning, wherever you're at, and know that you are not alone.